how we do.
Now, folks at home, I will point out that, and I think there are several of you watching right now. Oh, 8 people watching. That's fantastic. As you may or may not know, Craig is my significant other, so I'm finding this doubly amusing, and his frustration is just enjoyable for me to watch. All right, so I think what we need to do is improvise here, and I'm going to ask the cast of Sherlock Holmes, if Riles or could you pop in for a second? Are you guys ready to go? Sherlock Holmes?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
All right, you ready for us then?
So we will say goodbye to Jordan and Craig for right now, and we will remain in England, and we will enjoy a different part of England, pretty Victorian London that is home to Holmes. And Craig, can you cover your camera? We're ditching you for another show. It happens. I mean, this is live theater.
All right, everyone who has been gracious to join us. My name is.
Close your camera off, Craig. Just put your finger over it or something, or shut the computer. Yeah, that. Exactly. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I turn you over to Riles Wilder. And
it isn't heartbreaking for me to see Craig go. All right. I am Reagan Wilder. I've adapted this short story originally by Arthur Conan Doyle. For people who have read this story, you'll find that it's a very close adaptation with a twist at the end. All right. So my name is Reagan Wilder. I'd like to introduce my fabulous actors who have decided to join me on this adventure. We have John Trent. Corner over here. We have Aaliyah Harris in this box corner over here. We also have Lorna Nagara, and Jamie Poskett, also in their respective boxes. So tonight we are going to visit the world of the most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes, and longtime companion, Dr. Watson. Many know Holmes as a brilliant, logical mind with a talent for solutions that otherwise would have been lost in their era. But few people know who Sherlock Holmes is when the crime has been solved and the clients have exited stage left. Holmes's private life as a person and friend Dr. Watson is a study that deserves its own rapt attention. With that, I hope you enjoy this close adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's short story, The Dying Detective. Also received Give me one moment. She's made it. After receiving an alarming telegram, Dr. Watson has made it to her former flat at 221B Baker Street. At the downstairs landing, Mrs. Hudson rushes to meet her.
I'm here. Mrs. Hudson, I've come as quick as I can. What is it? What's the matter?
Oh, Dr. Watson, it's terrible. You need to see her. Go, shoo!
Well, might you tell me what's been happening?
That woman. I brought her meals to her each day the last week. She looked paler each time I saw her. She used to leap for her breakfast. Nowadays, she draws a blanket around her and croaks, "I'll see what I can keep down," with a smile, like she's sorry to bother me. Then I try to approach her, and she barks at me to go away. The dolt. And you best believe I begged her to let me call a doctor. Last week I said, "I'm getting a doctor." "No," she says. No explanation, just no. Then 3 days later, she wouldn't even stand to come to the table. I said, "I'm getting a doctor." But you know what she said.
No.
No, she just said no. I'm rather annoyed at this point. This morning, doctor, this morning she looked like death. Her eyes sunken in, her figure draped over the sofa, huddled in that blanket. Then I dropped the tray and I said, Miss Holmes, if you don't let me call a doctor this instant, you will die. Or I will die, and it will be the death of me between the heartache and the headache. And you know what she says?
Yes?
So help her God, in this hoarse voice I can scarcely hear her say, okay then, if you must get someone, get Watson. If I must, well, Dr. Watson, I must, and you must. Go see her.
And go Watson does, without another word. Her heart racing, she bounds each one of those 17 familiar steps up to the second floor she knew so well. She knew to turn the handle just so that its particular quirk of catching, if forced too quickly, would not bar her from her friend and her duty. Since their meeting nearly 8 years ago, Dr. Watson has found herself more than once instinctively driven to Holmes' side. Though separated by time and miles, these two women have never lost the thread that connects them. And now here comes Watson once again, turning that doorknob. Here, she throws open the door.
Holmes!
But she finds the flat instead of the familiar, warm, if eccentric room quite a horror. There are the great yellow curtains, drawn, dim, gray light making time feel still and the air seem thick. There is her old writing desk, untouched, but a sorry sight to see in this scene. In a pile on the floor are crumpled papers, bullet casings, for Holmes was sometimes taken to firing into the wall and frightening poor Mrs. Hudson. There also in that pile is an ivory box, quite out of place. All things, familiar and new, together seem haunted by the past and the present.
Holmes?
Watson, this is a fine spot we found ourselves in, isn't it?
I'm coming to you.
Don't.
My God, your voice is haggard. Your skin has gone pale. You must let me examine you.
Watson, if you come any closer, I shall order you out of the house.
Something's the matter with you. You've called for me. I am here. If you refuse me when you're like this, you're not thinking straight.
My dear friend, I must have someone to examine me. At least let me have someone in whom I have confidence.
Then you have none in me.
Well, in your friendship, yes. But what I suffer from is rare, exceedingly so. Even with someone with specialized medical training could kill me with the wrong care, and you are merely a general practitioner with limited experience and mediocre qualifications. It is painful to say these things, but you leave me with no choice.
Such a remark is unworthy of you. It shows me very clearly the state of your own nerves. But if you have no confidence in me, I would not intrude my services. If you'll not have me, you'll have another I'll bring. But someone you must have, and that's final. If you think that I'm going to stand here and see you die, then you are mistaken.
You mean well. Oh, shall I demonstrate your ignorance? What do you know of, pray, of Milan poisoning?
I've never heard of it.
I expected nothing else. By the name alone, of course, you can surmise it is a poison, and one that works slowly, affects the nerves, the mind. If untreated or mistreated, I am done within the day. You can do nothing.
Perhaps not, but I mean to try something. I'm getting Dr. Ainstree, a physician in London, who's well-versed in rare poisons.
Wait! You have my best interest at heart. And try something you can. But you must follow my instructions exactly. First, do you have change? Pocket change?
Yes, a few coins.
Distribute them between your front pockets. That'll balance you. Now!
As Holmes instructs her companion, Watson completes her duties. Though stricken with confusion, our doctor is used to taking direction she does not understand, as Holmes often has some plan she will not share. But all the time, Watson watches with worry, an increasing hesitation as the tasks become more bizarre, and as her friend's thoughts seem to wander.
Take up those papers. Set them here so I can reach them. You see that ivory box on the floor? No, do not touch it. Use the tongs. Yes, just like that. And set it on the mantelpiece, if you would. Good woman. Say, have you noticed how watching one wall for several hours, how Like a moving object, it seems. Like oysters. Hundreds of tiny oysters.
Holmes?
Culverton Smith, a planter from abroad. He'll help.
A planter?
314 Burke Street. Go to him and tell him how you found me. Delirious, raving, declining.
If he can help, I'll go. I'll drag him out by his ears.
You'll do nothing of the kind. Go to him, convince him to come, then leave. Tell him you're busy. Tell him you've patients to see. Anything. Tell him anything, but come back to me and leave his sight. You'll do well, Watson. You've never failed me. You and I, we've done our part. How many cases have we solved? How many souls have we helped? So many. Now if I go, shall the world be overrun by oysters?
Dr. Watson leaves her companion to this narrative, but the image of Holmes, laying supine, mind ravaged, something about oysters, is burned into her memory. She races into a cab and demands a drive at top speed to 314 Burke Street. All the while, that image replays. And Watson fears this is a wild chase when she could be fetching another physician, an experienced physician, as it were. She wonders, too, what happens when a mind is distorted? How much can she trust that Holmes knows how the story will end, as she so often has? Our doctor finds Mr. Culverton Smith. In fact, Smith seems almost tantalized by the idea of the detective begging his presence in her most dire moment of need. And as instructed, Watson convinces him to go alone and makes her way in secret back up those stairs, back to her companion at 221B Baker Street.
I'm back.
There you are. You've done it.
Did.
What did you tell him? How did you convince him?
That you heard of his particular expertise on plant-based poisons.
Excellent. Very much so. You've done well. You've done exactly as I asked. Exactly as a good friend would.
Yes. Well, he's coming. Now, will it hurt to let me examine you? At least if this Culverton Smith can't help, I can fetch another physician straight away.
No.
No? Why on earth not?
Now, in all the years Sherlock Holmes and Joan Watson have known each other, seldom has our doctor ever asked this question.
Because I said so. Is that not enough?
Watson stands in silence. Then, suddenly, a sound breaks the trance. Footsteps on the stairs.
Go now, Watson.
Where? In the bedroom?
No, behind the curtains, if you please.
Seriously?
Now, please, Watson, do not question me more. Quick, if you love me.
Watson obeys, rushing to the curtain and casting it over herself. Concealed she is as just in time, for Culverton Smith has just crossed the threshold. Holmes lies there, huddled under her blankets, clutching at her midsection. Watson hears the scuff of feet and peeks to see a man, Smith, shaking her friend's shoulder.
Miss Holmes, for God's sake, can you hear me?
Thank heavens you've come. I almost thought you wouldn't.
You look unwell.
I feel unwell. I'm very much in your debt, if I may borrow from your special knowledge.
Oh, you're the only one I've known to appreciate that. Can you sit up?
No, I can't. Not for 2 days. I can't. It's intolerable. You must help me. I can make a trade.
What did you say?
I'll keep your secret. I won't tell anyone, not a soul.
Our planter hovers over Holmes now, kneels beside the feet of the couch, his figure a shadow. He leans in close as Holmes speaks.
I know. You did it. And you did it to your nephew, too.
Culverton's shadow goes still. A cold chill goes through Watson, who is still concealed behind the curtain.
So you do.
He's just a lad. And you're a bully. The worst of your kind. You could still save him.
How can you prove it?
Ah! No! Please, I beg of you, anything for the pain. You brought something, yes.
Tell me, how do you think you got this poison in you? Huh? How did it happen?
I don't know. My mind is clouded, please.
Still hidden, Watson finds herself gripping the curtain. She scolds herself, thinking,
Oh, I should have gotten Ainstree.
You're fond of your smarts. Well, think now. How'd you come to be this way? Anything unusual you did?
No, nothing.
Think again.
Have mercy.
You're really gone, aren't you, Miss Holmes? I'll help your sorry mind. Did you receive anything by post?
Post.
In the last week, by chance? A box?
Yes. Yes, there was a box. A mechanism inside. When I opened it, a sharp spring came out and punctured me.
Oh, well, there you have it.
That box. I left it on the mantelpiece over there.
Watson's eyes dart to where the shadow of Holmes's arm points, outstretched and weak. Culverton silently stands, his figure striding across the room to the fireplace. Carefully, he lifts the little ivory box and cradles it in his arm.
I may as well leave with this. Now, it's been a pleasure.
I have one last request of you, sir. Would you please stay there while I call for a meal? I'm starving.
Watson audibly gasps. Holmes's voice is bright and cheery. The detective springs to her feet, casting the blankets to the floor and straightening her silk robe. Watson now draws back the curtain enough to see Culverton Smith facing away from her, standing as a man stricken by the impossible.
Introductions are in order, Mr. Smith. If you'll please give Watson the courtesy of your acknowledgement.
This was a face she had no desire to see spin round his neck like an alarmed owl, all puffed and red-faced.
Doctor, can you attest to everything you heard here?
I can.
Just then, another set of footsteps bang up the stairs, and in comes an officer. Upon seeing the room with these three, one leisurely dressed with a pile of blankets at her feet, another who appeared to be holding his breath, and yet another who just now is emerging from behind a curtain. Handily, the villain is apprehended. Mrs. Hudson, hearing the commotion, charges up the stairs. Mike's off, Aaliyah.
Who's this? What's going on? Oh, Sherlock Holmes, you've given me a fright. Do you think I live to put up with your antics? Honestly.
She puts a damp cloth to his face and takes off the makeup he had caked there to play her role. When finally she has said all of her,
How dare you?
and resolved aloud,
I swear I will never feel sorry for you for the rest of my life.
she leaves, and the room is suddenly once again transformed. Quiet, dim, and it is Holmes and Watson once more, alone, at 221B Baker Street.
Well then, Watson.
A pause. Holmes sits on the sofa, kicking away the blankets. Watson stands opposite, near the door.
Can I interest you in supper?
I thought you were done for.
Yes, a performance of supreme commitment. I haven't eaten a proper meal since Tuesday. Do you know if you feign stomach cramps well enough, there is actually pain?
Yes, must have hurt to malinger.
Well, past is past. How about some eggs?
I can't say I'm hungry.
Of course. You don't mind if I do.
Oh, do as you please. I'm going.
Won't you sit with me a while? It feels only natural, but I suppose I am a creature of habit. You performed excellently. Really. I couldn't have been more impressed.
Well, yes. Yes, well, I did believe you after all.
Exactly as you do.
Why? Why did you do it this way?
There you go again. Why? Oysters. Do you remember? If you hadn't believed I was going, well and truly going, you wouldn't have been so convincing. Culverton would have suspected you. You needed to play this part. And look, he's in custody and must be compelled to save his nephew. A boy's life is saved. We did that, you and I.
As Holmes springs to her feet in passion, gesturing towards her companion, Watson takes a step backwards towards the door.
And I am glad for that outcome, but not for... I believed you were dying.
We saved a life.
I believed you were dying.
You did super.
I believed you were dying.
Okay. You thought I was dying. Clearly, my methods have upset you.
I have to be alone. I need to think.
Holmes's arms, after a moment's hesitation, return limply to her sides. She sits, hands on knees.
Of course, Watson. But do me a favor, will you?
What's that?
Think well of me. I'll think on myself.
For a moment's time, the two women are quite still. Then Watson wordlessly exits, shutting the door behind her. And as Holmes looks around, she sees that writing desk her friend used to frequent so often. She crosses to the door, brings it ajar. It remains that way through the night.
That's absolutely amazing. Okay, that's not my bad.
Live theater. I love it. Thank you for watching this production of The Dying Detective. Once again, we had Aaliyah Harris as Mrs. Hudson, John Trent as Culverton Smith, Lorna Noguera as our Sherlock Holmes, and Jamie Poskett as our Watson. And for those of you who didn't know, we have flipped everything around and not informed us of this. My little joke between all of us.
And we look ready to have Reagan, you introduce it, please.
I don't know what I'm introducing. Best production.
Craig, you introduce it, please.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Jordan, you introduce it, please.
Go ahead. Father Brown, Work of the Dog by C.K. Chesterton. The cat, Father Brown, a priest, is played by Craig Whitford and myself, Fines. And also we have our dogs, too. So
Yes.
we'll introduce our dogs. All right. And we will begin. Setting, Father Brown's sitting room. Father, you're looking well, though it looks like the sun got the better of you.
Yes, I have to admit, I went for a very pleasant springtime bicycle ride yesterday, and the hat alone was not ample protection. I'm glad you stopped in, though, and brought a friend.
Oh, that it has. Normally he does this on cue, but there we go. All right. Oh, now you don't bother the father. Show some manners. Honestly, I apologize.
Oh, no, not at all. Man's best friend, after all, and it's not as if he's very big. And what is your name?
It's Knox.
Unusual name. What's its derivation?
I don't know. Actually, he's not exactly mine. I borrowed him. He actually is the reason that I'm here.
When you say borrowed, I've got to admit it sounds a tad sinister. Perhaps you've got something to explain, like your reason for borrowing someone else's dog to visit.
He's a witness, Father Brown, to a death.
Oh, of the rabbit variety, I'm hoping.
No, I'm afraid the victim was quite human.
Oh, well, then you do have something to explain. Best to begin at the start.
It's Mr. Druce, Colonel Druce, more properly. You know him, perhaps.
Well, to be sure, I've read about him in the newspapers. The terrible business at the house.
At his cottage. The death itself, well, it was in their summer house in the back. They live not too far.
Yes, I said a prayer for his soul, and I do have to admit, it's an intriguing case.
They're calling it the invisible murder. A man alone in his tiny little summer home, only one door, and he's killed. It's simply impossible unless an invisible man did it. And well, obviously that's impossible too.
Obviously.
It confounds me, Father Brown. And being as I was there when it happened.
Oh my, where were you?
Yes, and it's of course haunted me since. Poor old man stabbed in the back, lying there, blood seeping through his white linen coat. Like a summer story turned nightmare. I've been cleared of any suspicion, needless to say.
Of course.
But that's just the thing. For all intents and purposes, we've all been cleared of any suspicion. Everyone has an alibi, and the weapon is nowhere to be seen, and they have searched high and low. The summer house, the cottage, the grounds, the beach.
The weapon, a knife of some sort?
Yes, knife. Stiletto, perhaps. We've all been cleared.
And who is we?
Well, the victim, the colonel, was a widower, and he had 2 children. His daughter, Violet, who was in the main carriage, saw and heard no one. Well, no, except her beau, Dr. Valentine, who had paid her a call.
Go on.
Then there's his son, Donald, my old chum, the man I was there to see. He'd invited me up many a time, but Dottie and I had always had some engagement or other. Talk about timing.
She stayed home, your wife?
Thankfully, yes. So myself, Donald's sister Violet, Dr. Valentine.
Aptly named.
Then there was Mr. Floyd, my compatriot.
Another American.
He was on the ladder, chopping away at the hedge. He has an odd habit of never being able to sit still, always doing, helping, fixing. Gets ahead of himself in confidence. Sherlock Holmes never towered over Scotland Yard with more titanic intellectual pride and scorn than Floyd over the police investigating Colonel Druce's death.
And whom else?
It's Floyd and Trail, the lawyer. He was there about, to me this seems important, the Colonel's will.
Well, we can't say if it's important, unimportant, until we see the complete picture. But we'll take it into account.
Of course. There was again the Colonel, may he rest, his son, my friend Donald, Donald's sister, Violet, and her beau, Dr. Valentine, Floyd, the American assistant, the lawyer Trail. All of them were up by the house at the time the Colonel was killed.
And you were?
I was at the beach with the nephews, Bert and Harry.
Nephews of the poor Colonel?
Yes. But you see, Father, in all this litany, every one of us has an alibi corroborated by several other of us. And so, unless there's some great conspiracy between the group that remained at the house, which everyone but me and the nephews, or the group at the beach, me and the nephews, I don't know. I just can't figure it. And neither can the police. Now, Harry, he was a policeman for Imperial Force in India. Long ago, he racked his own brain.
So, out of answers, you believe you're left with this fine fellow here?
No, well, yes, in a manner of speaking. You see, I was at the beach, divided from the beach by just a short strip of sand and the hedge.
With Bert and Harry.
Yes, and Bert and I were looking at this local landmark, 2 silly boulders balanced on each other. I don't think much of it, but apparently it's a source of local pride. And Harry was with us. He stepped back a minute to fill his pipe out of courtesy, then joined us. And then Bert threw his walking stick into the drink, and Knox went and got it. And then Harry joined, threw his in too, and Knox went in again. But then instead of retrieving it, this old boy comes back to us and howls in the most sad, mournful way.
Was he injured?
No. Estimating the time, Father Brown, this dog here exhibited that very strange behavior right when their life was being stabbed out of Colonel Druce. In fact, it was just a few moments later when he heard poor Violet scream and went rushing to see what had happened. On the way, we crossed paths with lawyer Trail, The dog begins an eruption of barking.
I see. So, you believe the dog not only senses the murder, but detected the murderer.
Well, not exactly. Bert pointed out a dog would growl if he disliked someone, not bark. Bert's a bit of a know-it-all when it comes to animals. He's a horse expert more than dogs.
I see. Well, unless you're going to consult the excitement levels and volume of the songs and the birds, the bugs, the squirrels, and perhaps the trees, I don't think you should be putting any stock in the abilities of this dog to indicate any truth about the murder.
I'm only suggesting.
Yeah, and you shouldn't be. That's a very unhelpful way of thinking and surprising for someone who had so little faith in the unseen as a general rule, if I recall correctly, with the exception of the validity of horse expert Harry's comment about the growling.
Bert was the expert. The last thing Harry was an expert on horses.
You need to explain that.
Well, not germane to the case, but one hears things, and it seems the cousins Donald and Harry had very similar lifestyles.
From what I've heard of Donald Druce, he's a bit of a playboy, is it?
Yes, that's why I was on the beach walking with his cousins instead of having brunch with him. He'd gone to bed at dawn, for God's sake, and was just waking up. He's quite a mess, actually, all in all.
And Harry as well?
That's probably not a fair comparison. Harry seems more of a solid chap, but his one vice is a big one. Gambling.
Horses.
And cards and casinos and on and on. He's quite in a hole from what I understand. Not that I asked, I mean, one wouldn't. Also a reason he was removed from the police overseas, I gather.
And am I correct to say your chum Donald was a disappointment to the colonel? And perhaps the will which was being addressed this weekend would reflect that fact.
Well, it was common knowledge. Donald was being taken out of the will, yes. But please, Father, believe me, Donald didn't do it. He couldn't have. For all he is, he's not a killer. I know it's cliche, but he isn't. He couldn't possibly be him.
Well, the sad truth is you've come here today because you have a case where it couldn't possibly be anyone. All this obsession with where the knife may be, has no one thought about motive, the police?
Perhaps, but with the alibi... Oh, wait, the doctor. The doctor witnessed the signing of the will, which means he can't be in it, yet he's set to marry Violet, who will surely inherit the whole estate.
Yeah, a hastened death at the hands of a man who knows his way around sharp medical instruments.
Which he had in his medical bag. Doctors always have a medical bag.
And who else witnessed the signing of the will? Could it be the loyal attendant, Floyd the American?
Oh, indeed.
Also then, not in the will, perhaps embittered, indignant, also a man doing gardening work that day, and thus in possession of instruments very much like a knife.
See, yes, that's two right there. Two men with sharp objects and motives.
Though the dog didn't bark at either of them.
All right. I admit I was not thinking rationally when I thought the dog had some kind of second sight, but what if Floyd and Valentine were in it together?
All these suggestions are fancies just now. The problem is not who did it or what did it, but how it was done. We might find many men and even many tools, pins and shears and lancets, but how did a man get into the room, and how did even a pin get into it?
And what's your answer? Or at least tell me what I should do.
I have no conclusion. I only posit the question. But if I were you, I should go back to the Druce house, check in with Harry, the policeman cousin. I assume he's taken charge of the sleuthing, If I were you, I should run down and see how he's getting on, see what he's been doing in the way of amateur detection. There may be news already. I'm sorry, I'm of no more immediate help.
No, thank you. You've been very kind to listen to all of this. And if you think of anything, come on, Knox. Come on, boy. He'll be back. Blackout, 2 days later.
Well, fine. So you look a bit the worse for wear, I'm afraid.
You told me to check in with Harry. You must have known what I would find. He's dead. He's dead by what seems to be his own hand. And I found the body. You suspected this. How did you know?
Well, I did suspect, but I didn't know. I'm sorry, Fines. I thought you might have arrived in time to talk to him and find a better resolution.
The rock formation we'd been looking at all day at the beach. He had written in the sand, "The rock of fortune falls on the fool," and toppled it on himself. The police are sure it was intentional.
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid it all makes sense.
Well, perhaps to you.
Well, what it comes down to, Fines, is that you were right in a way about the dog. His reactions were important, very, in fact, but not as some human kind of sixth sense. No, as the simple reactions of the dog to the world around him. They're simple, really. Dogs, you have food, they may beg for it. You mistreat them, they may cower or growl. As your horse expert said, and if you throw a stick into the water, a well-trained dog goes in and retrieves it and comes back to his master, happy and looking for a pat on the head and another toss.
Yes, and
Bert, the horse expert, threw his walking stick into the water. Knox retrieved it. Then what happened?
Harry threw in his stick.
But
Knox came back out of the water without it.
all right, he came back out. He ran to you three and he howled plaintively. Not because he sensed his owner was dead several hundred yards away, but because someone hadn't played fair with him. The human had thrown the stick Knox had run to retrieve it, but the stick wasn't floating along in the waves. It had sunk to the bottom. Because it wasn't a walking stick. It was a rod of steel with a very thin shell of cane and a sharp point. In other words, it was a sword stick, as a policeman abroad may have acquired. He gets rid of a bloody weapon so oddly and yet so naturally by throwing it into the sea for a retriever, only the retriever wanted to live up to his title and was distressed when he couldn't.
He threw the stick into the ocean. A murder weapon, never to be suspected, and for it never to be seen again. But how did it become a murder weapon? How did he use it against his uncle? You said it was all about getting into the room.
Well, I had a guess right at the beginning when you said the word summer house, and another one when you said that Druce wore a white coat. As long as everybody was looking for a short dagger, nobody thought of it. But we visualize a rather long blade like a rapier, and it's not so impossible.
But the room.
Yes, the room. Finds all that talk in detective stories, locked rooms, just one entrance, impossibilities. It doesn't matter when it comes to a classic English summer house. A summer house doesn't have 4 impenetrable walls. It is not made like that. It is often made, as was in this case, of closely interlaced but separate boughs and strips of wood in which there are chinks and gaps here and there. There was one of them just behind Druce's back as he sat in the chair up against the wall, inside that room. But just as the room was a summer house, so the chair was a basket chair. That also was a lattice of loopholes. And lastly, the summer house was close up under the hedge. You've just told me that it was really a thin hedge. A man standing outside could easily see through the lattice wall and the lattice chair through one tiny hole, or even a large one, that spot of white linen from the colonel's white linen summer jacket.
When?
Well, you weren't too specific about geography, but I take it since you could hear Violet scream, you weren't miles and miles away, but rather close.
And?
Well, you mentioned Harry stepped back for a moment to fill his pipe, an act of courtesy that also put him on a collision course with this grievous sin.
He saw the spot of white. He saw the colonel, and with his sword stick, but surely it was a very odd chance and a very sudden choice. Besides, he couldn't be certain the old man's money had passed to him, and as a fact, it hadn't.
You misunderstood the man's character. If he had known the money would come to him, I seriously believe he wouldn't have done it. He would have seen it as the terrible, hideous thing that any murder is. The temptation for that type of man is to do a mad thing precisely because he wants to say, nobody but I could have seized that chance, or seen that it was then or never.
He was mad then.
In a way. It is the megalomania of the gambler. The more incongruous the coincidence, the more instantaneous the decision. The more likely he is to snatch the chance. The accident, the very triviality of the white speck and the hole in the hedge intoxicated him like a vision of the world's desire. Nobody clever enough to see such a combination of accidents could be cowardly enough not to use them. That is how the devil talks to the gambler. But the devil himself would hardly have induced that unhappy man to go down in a dull, deliberate way and kill an old uncle from whom he'd always had expectations. No, I think he looked up and saw that rock formation that you speak of, two rocks, one teetering on the edge of falling, and he was inspired to take the leap, as if that shaky tower was himself. He gambled he wouldn't fall.
And he acted. He took his gamble.
Indeed. And the next difficulty was to cover his tracks. To be found with a sword stick, let alone a bloodstained sword stick, would be fatal. Even if he threw it into the sea, the action might be noticed. Unless, indeed, he could think of some more natural way of covering the action. As you know, he did think of one, and a very good one.
All for a fortune he was never going to inherit. What a tragedy. What an utter waste.
Compounded by the second mortal sin he committed in the same spot, which inspired him to commit the first. I will pray for his soul.
Someone should. And what of this fine fellow here? He did win the day after all, in his way.
Well, that, my dear Fines, I believe is the first effect of not believing in a God, that you lose your common sense and can't see things as they are. And a dog is an omen, and a cat is a mystery, and a pig is a mascot, and a beetle is a scarab, calling up all the menagerie of polytheism from Egypt and old India. Dog Anubis and great green-eyed Pasht and all the body howling bulls of Bashan. And all because you are frightened before words. He was made man. Well, in any case, I believe that this dog has earned himself a scone.
And that was G.K. Chesterton's Father Brown, Oracle of the Dog with Jordan Greeley and Craig Whitford.
I have.
We had
study.
appearances by two different dogs. We had
Okay.
Buddy
She wants to
and
buy.
Layla,
Come
who
on.
walked behind Craig at some point during this. There she
This
is.
was the understudy for Jordan for Buddy.
And now, if we could take a moment to reset, we're about to bring you into 1930s Harlem. A murder has been committed, or has it? I don't know, but I do know that we have some good theme music, which I am going to play for you now. As we introduce our actors. Craig, can you cover up? Thank you. We have, once again joining us, Aaliyah Harris. She will be playing Detective Perry Dart. We have Jeanette Lake playing Dr. Archer, criminal profiler. We have Poti Toku playing the mysterious Frimbo. And we have Mike Leggy playing Officer Jones. Now we bring you to Harlem, 1932. Rudolph Fisher's The Conjure Man Dies.
I'm hoping you'd give me something useful, Doctor. This case is going nowhere. I can't even pin down who the victim is.
And Poti
Oh,
will
I've
let you
Plenty of
close
ideas, but none that can hold up in court.
Are they a secret, or do I get to hear?
I don't know. I declared a man dead last Saturday night. We thought it was Frimbo. But then Frimbo shows up very much alive.
Alive and contentious.
I declared a man dead. But the body we found, the remains, someone tried to burn and destroy. It's the same body I declared dead. I know it is. Taken from the morgue.
Well, I don't think anyone doubts it. It's a bit too coincidental. Two separate bodies showing up in one place, especially now that we know that our friend Mr. Frimbo wasn't dead to begin with. Might be a little too coincidental if he didn't have anything to do with it.
You think he's the killer? I agree.
Really? Victim to killer in 24 hours. What's the story?
I had an interesting interview with the gentleman himself. He's a full-fledged paranoid.
So wouldn't that mean he's afraid of being killed? Not that he'd kill someone, unless, I guess, if he thought it was self-defense.
No. A paranoid is a very special kind of nut. He has an extremely bright mind, even flashes of genius, but he's had some maladjustment. Something happened to him, and since he believed the world is against him, he developed a persecution complex. He hides it well, but it's there. For instance, he came here from Africa as a student. When he wasn't accepted at the university he wanted to attend, he decided it was because of his race.
I don't think that's delusional, Doc. Maybe they let you into medical school, but...
Except the school he mentioned let in several other men of his complexion the same year.
Maybe they hit their limit. A black man fearing persecution isn't so nuts in my way of thinking.
I know it's hard to explain, but there is a difference. He isn't just paranoid about the white world, but everyone and everything. And to counterpoint this belief, he had to come up with a balancing delusion that people are against him because he's special, better than others. If the world's against me, I must be a great guy.
I know a flock of paranoids then.
Me too, but we don't know anyone whose delusions of grandeur reach these heights. He began by embracing determinism. Everything is a result of some previous cause. Who's successful, who's smart, the laws of the universe is in order. But then his delusions step in. But I, Frimbo, are a man of a different order, a free agent, reading past and present and modifying the future. Prosecution shall never touch me. Does this mean anything to you, Dart?
Not a damn thing, but it doesn't have to. Go on from there.
Frimbo's a paranoid, and when it gets as bad as it is, getting for him,
he'll kill someone.
Either because his first delusion makes him feel endangered, or his second has him believing he's superior to others. He feels he has the right to remove them from the situation.
Does he think he can remove you?
No, not likely. See, that's another piece of the puzzle. The paranoid will make quick decisions, irrationally even. Frimbo's decided out of hand to take me into his confidence, sees me as an intellectual peer. Well, almost. Not sure he believes anyone can reach those heights, but he's invited me back to meet with him again.
Well, be careful, Doc. I don't mind when nuts are nuts, but when they're as fancy as that, they could end up turning to poison.
That's all right. I know antidotes.
Do you think you're close enough with him to get him to tell you who it was he killed? Whether it's his flunky or someone else we haven't thought of?
I don't know. It's...
Ma'am, we've had what you might call a break.
This better be good.
Martha Crouch, one of Frimbo's customers at the psychic joint.
Yeah?
Patrolman just brought her in. She was on the sidewalk outside her apartment, beating the daylights out of her husband.
What?
Yeah. Said her old man killed Frimbo out of jealousy. Says she was taking her revenge. And her husband, he just keeps saying, I'm sorry, crying like a baby. Refused to let us take him to the hospital. Got them both in the cells because I can't tell what end is up with these two.
You're not the only one, Jones. And I've had enough of this speculation. Get Frimbo down here. Let's see if our conjure man was reading more than Mrs. Crouch's palm. Well, Mr. Frimbo, may I congratulate you on you not being dead?
I assume you know why you're here, Frimbo.
Tonight we shall solve a mystery, an important mystery.
Your death or someone's death?
My death or my life, I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I could foresee the future up to a point tonight, but then it went blank. There was nothing. I was struck blind. The abrupt termination which cut off my vision could be someone else's death or mine.
A premonition?
It might be called such.
Getting back to the point, we need some answers from you, Frimbo. 2 people have been arrested in a connection to a murder, and we don't know who the victim is, except that it isn't you.
If you will care to know the truth.
Please. But don't try anything funny. We've anticipated your tricks.
Tricks? It's an unkind word. The truth of the matter is, I have not killed anyone. It is true that I have disposed of my servant's remains.
So it was your assistant who was killed?
Yes. And so I perform a tribal duty. As you know, in my homeland, I'm a tribal king. This man was a fellow tribesman of mine. In fact, even closer. He was of my clan and also used the name Frimbo. His Christian name has he been a Christian? Nogo.
And your duty to Nogo Frimbo was to burn his corpse in your basement fireplace.
I think the detective would like a little more of an explanation.
It is our tradition that meeting death at the hands of an outsider brings disgrace. Nogo was killed by an outsider. His body needed to be purged by fire before sunset on the 3rd day. it was the only way to cleanse his spirit. Whatever penalty I must pay, I have no regrets. My only one regret, Detective Dart, is that you interrupt me and I could not complete the next part of my obligation.
There was more to the ritual?
No. The next part of my duty should be clear to people such as you.
Find the killer.
Exactly. As the king of my people, it's my duty. Given this is your country, not mine, I intended to turn it to you.
And how? How am I supposed to believe, as you confess here to bringing your servant's corpse, that you didn't also kill him? You're going to have to do more than cite tradition here, Frimbo, if you want me to believe you.
It's not my slightest importance to whether you believe me or not. Though, if you knew my tradition, Detective, you know there is no possibility I will ever harm my subjects, or he will force me to harm him in my own defense. This is, in a word, ridiculous.
Why did you do all that play acting then? Why pretend you were dead and then come back? Why didn't you just explain that?
The ritual would not have been allowed, not within 3 days. So I knew everyone thought the corpse was mine and simply stole it and do whatever I have to do. It was not difficult.
Then you showed yourself to be alive. So it didn't seem like a missing corpse, just a corpse that had come back to life. Until we found what was left of Nogo after the ritual.
No one until then thought were any other dead body involved.
Do you know who killed your tribesman, Frimbo?
My guess is Nogo was mistaken for me. I have enemies. Nogo was a simple man and did not. It was a dark room. Mistaken identity.
Enemies. And they had been making noise, threatening you.
Business concern. I don't know if they've done this killing or not. They were not such serious criminals.
What about Martha Crouch?
Martha? Mother had come to me many times for my advice and my visions.
And her husband, do you know him?
Him? I've never met.
I bet you haven't.
So, is it possible that the person who tried to kill you, but instead killed Nogo, was Martha's husband? Would he have reason to be concerned?
Who is to say? Men can be very paranoid, you know.
Listen, pal, if you don't want charges brought against you for obstruction.
As I said, the vision I had this morning was incomplete. It went to nothing but darkness. A jealous husband is as likely as anyone else. If he's here, I would like to speak to him face to face.
Yeah, you can forget about that.
Detective, we've got a confession, and it didn't take much.
From Mr. Crouch?
Yes, apparently he,
Go ahead, officer. This concerns him too.
Apparently it was like Mrs. Crouch thought. Her husband suspected that she and, that was his wife, stepping out. And he went to the Frimbo's place and he killed him. Or, thought he did.
To kill a man over that silly woman? Pathetic.
Something's pathetic. All right, Jones. Thanks.
But there's more, ma'am. He's desperate to talk to Frimbo. He's climbing the walls.
Intriguing.
What's his problem?
Well, he says he's sure he shot Frimbo and killed him, and figures if a dead man is still visible, he's some kind of a ghost. He's seen him several times since the shooting, ma'am, and he's convinced he's being haunted. He's afraid for his life.
He should be, but not from this man. Read him his rights.
You You figured out the killer was Mr. Crouch, the jealous husband. You paid him visits to scare him into coming forward to the police. You clever son of a...
I did my duty towards my clan and my subjects, and I'll solve your case for you. So perhaps now I can go? Dr. Archer, it has been a pleasure meeting a person of your intellect.
You are an interesting man, Mr. Frimbo. I don't think I can say much more than that.
Hey, Frimbo, do yourself a favor.
What is that?
Find a new neighborhood to run your dog and pony show in. Another country, another city. I don't care. But get a vision of going somewhere else. Your good fortune's running out around here. And in short, if you want a future at all, stay the hell out of Harlem.
And very nice. Thank you. That again was Aaliyah Harris, Jeanette Lake,
No, that was good.
Koti Toku, and the one and only Mike Leggy.
Good job, guys.
And I want to thank our cast, all of whom you see before you, or most of whom you see before you. Special shout out to Riles Wilder for the amazing job directing and writing the Sherlock Holmes piece. All the actors, your audience, and a special reminder, next week is Memorial Day weekend, so we will not be doing a broadcast, which means we will have a broadcast after that that is extra special, big, and awesome. So again, on behalf of the Off Stories Theater Company, thank you for tuning in, and feel free to watch this again because the video will be preserved for all time. Thank you, and have a good night.
See you guys.
See you.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Love your mysteries.